Welcome to Fantasy and Faith, where Muslim storytelling meets myth and magic, weaving faith, history, and imagination into unforgettable worlds. Today's episode is about religion and faith in fantasy. Tales of the fantastic have always been intertwined with faith and religion. No doubt, the Genesis story in the Bible and the origins of the universe in mythologies of ancient times have inspired many a writer to come up with belief systems for the peoples of their worlds. Early fantasy writers such as Tolkien and C.S. Lewis are known for their religious symbolism. Religion is the word to describe the socio-cultural systems that help organize beliefs, worldviews, and what is holy and unholy. Faith is the belief that one has about the divine. You can have faith without needing religion, and I have personally met people who outwardly appear religious but have little faith inside. C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is straight up allegory, with Aslan fulfilling a messianic role and even sacrificing himself for the sins of Edmund before coming back to life. The Pevensies are often referred to as sons and daughters of Adam and Eve, and in the last battle, fought against Tash, the Antichrist, there is even a false prophet with a donkey dressed in a lion's skin. After the battle, the protagonists find themselves in a Narnia remade. Better, it has become the Eternal Garden. In the prequel, The Magician's Nephew, we follow Diggory and Polly as they witness the creation of the universe in Narnia. Tolkien's weaving of mythology and faith are a lot more subtle. He leans heavily on Nordic mythology with his Maya and Valar referred to as godlike beings, such as Ulmo and Ole. However, Tolkien has included a one true god in his stories too, Eru Ilúvatar, he that is alone. His monotheism is of the type that is synonymous with the Abrahamic faiths, and not like Hindu or Greek monotheism, though there is some polytheistic ideas here too, in the creation of the people and places in Middle Earth. Other religious themes include the struggle against temptation, which is symbolized by the rings of power in the novels. Those that seek power and control fall under the sway of the rings, but those who only wish to serve their fellows are able to resist it. Then there is the fall of Gandalf into darkness, whilst battling a literal demon wreathed in flames, before being born again as Gandalf the White. Further still, Galadriel offers the fellowship the sacrament by making them drink from a cup and eating lembas biscuits. How does religion relate to world building? Sociologically, religion is part of the fabric of society and is a driving force in our early socialization. As humans, we are obsessed with the idea of a divine supernatural force and have given this force various names, including nature, the universe, science, but most commonly, God. In Europe, the church and the state separated during the 17th and 18th century through the Enlightenment movement. This movement spread from there to also encompass art, literature, and the sciences. This is central to understanding the attitudes of people in the West towards religion. However, from Turkey to China, this Enlightenment movement did not have an influence until the 20th and 21st centuries. This is perhaps why religions such as Islam, Hinduism, Sikhism, and Buddhism, and even Christianity are still going strong, whilst Christianity in the West is declining. The Marxist idea that humans invented God to help explain things and provide us comfort has begun to prevail. However, in Islamic thinking, there is no separation of religion and science. Science explains things better than religion does, possibly because the people of the time at which religions developed lacked the scientific tools to understand how the world and the cosmos works. In Islam, our belief is not blind faith, but it relies on the rational explanation that all things in the universe are contingent on something else, which would lead us down an endless rabbit hole unless, in the end, rationally speaking, of course, there has to be something that all other things are dependent on. Therefore, for Muslims, science is the study of patterns in the contingent universe of God's will and command. The point, before it gets away from me, is that as humans, we have an obsession with God, religion, and trying to understand our role in the universe. Therefore, our fictional worlds need to also be steeped in this obsession. Thematically, religion may be dealt with in different ways depending on the author's own perspective, but we will come back to that. So, what are belief systems? You have theism, which is the belief that all things are dependent in some way on one supreme or ultimate being. Islam, Christianity, and Judaism fall into this category. This is different from deism. Deism is the belief that God exists but is not involved in the world in the same personal way that God is in theistic belief systems. Pantheism believes that the universe itself is God, therefore, all the laws of the universe and its substance is all part of God. Polytheism is the belief in many gods. Most other religions fall under this category, though many of them would also claim to be monotheistic in having one overarching deity. Totemism, a mystical relationship between a group of people or an individual and a totem, which is either a physical being or an inanimate object, like an animal or the sun. Animism is the belief that all things exude a spiritual essence and a life, and that these spirits can interact with and influence human life. Shamanism is the belief that certain individuals can access this world of malevolent and benevolent spirits. So, this is different from the monotheistic belief in angels and demons. This is more, even inanimate objects can be possessed by spiritual energy. Your world building should include a range of these different types of beliefs, depending on how primordial or modern your world is. So, if your characters are still living in small hunter gatherer communities, they may be animists or totemists. If your world is more medieval, they are likely to be monotheists or polytheists, which creates good grounds for conflict. Joe Abercrombie's first law books are a good example of this, with the battle between the church and other religions center stage. The Game of Thrones, or the Songs of Ice and Fire as they're actually called, features different religions, but the characters are more driven by personal power or vengeance than their religious beliefs. If your book is more steampunk or cyberpunk, it's likely to have a mixture of monotheism, deism, and pantheism in your story. In my books, whilst other religious beliefs may exist in my fictional worlds, the belief in a creator god takes primacy. In The Changeling King, for instance, the Alvor, which are elf like people, believe in the creator. The dwarves, or the Dvargar as I call them, believe in a single creator. And therefore, that is the main religion of the peoples of the Changeling King. One of my pipeline projects is centered around an ancient people discovering a monolith in the middle of a wilderness. They come into that world through large portals that opened up during a time of hardship and bring them to this world. And eventually, they find their way into a valley that has this massive black monolith upon which writing appears. And the person who first lays eyes on this is the leader of one of these tribes, and he becomes the first reader. He's instantly able to read the text on this monolith. And then they are joined by other peoples eventually, and each of them has a reader. The eventual dominance of this monotheistic religion also leads to conflicts in the borderlands where people who stop believing in the monotheistic faith of this that is proposed by this monolith, then this leads for the people of the monolith to try and reconquer and reestablish the faith in all those areas. In other places, there is a conflict over who has control of the monolith because to many of the people, the monolith has some kind of divine power that having that on your side will lead to dominance over all other people of the world. So, some of the themes and symbols you find in fantasy include the outward expression of themes or an inward dialogue on the character's search for meaning. The most common themes are the battle between good versus evil. High fantasy and epic fantasy tends towards a literal battle of good versus evil. For instance, Gandalf versus Sauron, Aslan versus the White Witch, Harry Potter versus Voldemort, although Rowling doesn't like calling it fantasy. Or it can be more diffused, with characters operating in the grey areas between good and evil. David Gemmell was a master of this, one of the reasons why his books still hold to the test of time. and why they were so well held is because many of his characters operated in this grey area between good and evil. It's more realistic to show that characters believe they are on the side of good, even if other characters see them as being on the side of evil. For a real world example, think George W. Bush. He thought he was fighting a holy war during the War on Terror, whilst Bin Laden, on the other hand, saw America as the great evil of our time and was angry with the colonization efforts and dominance over the Middle East. Another theme is life versus death, which is the staple of dark and grimdark fantasy. Anna Smith Sparks' books are a balancing act between revulsion and elation, violence and pleasure, life and death. Both of these themes are also about power and control. The conflicts that we have seen in the past century and that are currently happening in the world have utilized religion for propaganda and to offer some form of sick justification for oppression. The Nazis believed in their superiority and the superiority of the white Christians over all others. The Zionists believe in the superiority over the Palestinians and the Arabs, and Donald Trump just believes in his own superiority. Fantasy fiction is also full of divine intervention, from the ancient Greco Roman and Nordic mythologies to Harry Potter, in which the power of love transcends magical forces. Though these days, Deus Ex Machina is also considered a no no unless the concept is fully baked into the story beforehand. So, if there is going to be a moment of divine intervention, there needs to be a build up to this happening throughout the story so that you've established that this kind of thing is not only possible but a regular or occasional occurrence within that world. So, for instance, if you have a world where there is always a lightning storm running and lightning's hitting all over the place all the time, and then one of your characters is in dire danger, all of his companions or her companions are scattered, there's no way that he or she can fight back against this enemy, and then a random bolt of lightning hits and strikes down the enemy. So you've got to have established beforehand that this is a possibility. Maybe even show another character earlier on being hit by lightning and dying. Or if you want the enemy to survive, then showing that whilst these lightning bolts are frightening and do a good deal of damage, it is possible for a person to survive them. Fantasy fiction is also obsessed with the chosen one prophecy, where either someone will save or destroy the world. Again, more recent fictional works have played on this concept heavily. One of the most famous, perhaps, is Anakin Skywalker's arc as the chosen one in the Skywalker saga. Some have even attempted to subvert it for a more interesting story. In fact, subverting tropes is now good business. Another theme that plays well with the chosen one trope is that of sacrifice and martyrdom. Who can forget Ned Stark losing his noble head because he was unwilling to bend the knee and bend his principles and beliefs? Sacrifice can be literal, in that a character is giving up their life for the sake of the greater good or for their friends. Again, think of Obi-Wan Kenobi allowing Darth Vader to strike him down, even though he warns him that if you strike me down now, I'll become more powerful than you can ever imagine. But his act of sacrifice is there to give his companions time to escape, but also give Luke the motivation that he needs to be able to fight against Darth Vader. He must have known at some point that Luke Skywalker will find out that Anakin is Darth Vader and is his father, and therefore he would need a powerful motivation to look beyond that relationship and to do the thing that Obi-Wan couldn't do, which is to kill Anakin Skywalker. However, the prophecy proves true, and Anakin does bring balance back to the Force. Martyrdom is much more subtle and difficult to set up, but tends to have a bigger payoff in terms of the plot. Um, Usually, it becomes a turning point for the battle or a turning point for the people of that world who might be being oppressed. When a key character or individual is killed, it becomes the call to others to rally and fight back. In conclusion, religion is an important part of our world, and therefore it needs to be part of your fantasy world. Your places and characters can gain much depth by the inclusion of communal and personal beliefs, with rituals and festivals providing a shape and uniqueness to your peoples. There's a lot of scope here for the dealing with today's difficult topics and world events by creating parallels in your fictional worlds. You can also use powerful allegory like C.S. Lewis, or you can be more subtle like Tolkien. You can make religion a central source of conflict like Abercrombie's first love books, or part of the milieu like George R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire books. Either way, religion and belief need to be in the mix. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This really does help the channel to expand. So I do really depend on your support. Please do leave a comment. I reply to every comment that I receive. I do that personally. I don't have anyone to delegate it to. And so thanks for joining me on Fantasy and Faith. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep writing, and let your stories shine.